thanks. Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
So I'm excited to have you on the Scooby panel. It's definitely going to be fun, I promise. On today's episode of the Scooby panel, Nikki meets animator, director, and producer Chris Bailey. So what drew you to animation and how did that eventually lead you to Scooby-Doo?
Well, like most kids, I drew. Most kids draw until they're around 7 or 8, and then I guess some like a little better, and some are more frustrated and they move on to other things. And when I was a little kid, I watched Scooby. I'm old enough that I watched Scooby in the original run. So cartoons were almost exclusively on Saturday morning at that point. And I always loved horror. And so that to see an animated horror thing was great. And I know it wasn't real horror. It always turned out to be, a guy under a rubber mask and all that. But still, I liked the coolness of the villains and things like that. And then I kind of moved on to superheroes and more adult horror as I grew older. But I never lost interest in cartoons. And I like both, superhero comic books, Warner Brothers cartoons, and I still kind of liked everything, even though I had preferences. So I went to Cal Arts after high school, and to their Disney animation program. Within a few years, I was an animator at Disney, and I've done a lot of things. I worked on feature films and TV series and theme park films, and I was directing a movie called Paws of Fury. It was originally called Blazing Samurai, and it hit a production snag. And I called Sam Register at Warner Brothers and said, hey, we always talked about doing a cartoony superhero-y thing, and my movie hit a snag, and maybe now's a good time. So he put me in touch with Jay, who was the executive at the time. And Jay actually brought me in for another project that ultimately led its way to him asking me what I thought about Scooby. So that's sort of I just took you from me being 6 years old to whatever.
So did you watch Scooby when it originally premiered?
Yeah, absolutely. I watched the first 2 seasons. I was at that prime age group. And then and after that, it was more just about keeping, just sort of informed about what was going on.
Yeah, that's great. How did your early experiences in animation shape the kind of storyteller that you are today?
Gosh, it's funny because I mentioned liking horror and superhero comics, but my early career was at Disney. And and I like Disney films. I love Disney animation, and I still remember, when back in the I think it was 60s, they actually ran Alice in Wonderland on TV. And I remember going over to a friend's house and they were watching it. My buddy and I, we were just playing, but we were walking through the living room and it was on. And I'd never seen animation that looked like that before because I was watching Scooby and Saturday morning stuff, right? And it was like, holy crap, what is that? Why does that look so, different, weird, good, amazing? And so anyway, so I was at Disney, and I still had that feeling of in awe of that type of animation, and that was always a goal of mine to do as a craftsman. But I'm not really a musical theater guy. I like, even when I watched Scooby as a kid, and the score was dramatic jazz, and Shaggy and Scooby thought they were gonna die. I love that. When I watched Star Trek or Man from U.N.C.L.E. or any of that stuff when I was a kid, it's like I like that thrill that the hero might die. And I never really felt like anybody was going to die in a Disney movie. So I think, I still had that, that itch to scratch of of making something that would thrill like a little kid, where they really felt the main characters were in jeopardy.
It is amazing how they can do that with Scooby-Doo and still keep it lighthearted and fun.
That's right. I think, the archetype that I fall back on, and I pitched it to Mike Ryan, our story editor, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's completely right." Or maybe it was vice versa. Maybe he pitched it to me. I can't remember. I would hate to take credit away from him. But it was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't seen it, but I have some people that have been on the panel that absolutely love it and have told me that I need to watch it.
Yeah, it's great because Abbott and Costello, they're a comedy duo, and they have these adventures, and there's one where they meet the Wolfman and Dracula and the Frankenstein monster. And what was amazing, it's still a wacky, silly Abbott and Costello farce, but that's the real Wolfman. That's Bela Lugosi as Dracula, and that's the real Frankenstein monster, and they play it straight. And that those are destructive things. And so I think Abbott and Costello kind of give you that comfort that they're kind of the clowns. And even though they're terrified, we know those things are really life-threatening things. There's something about that mix, again, getting back to, lighthearted comedy, but still you think there's a threat there where the characters are in real jeopardy that I find appealing.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to look that up and watch it. Was there a moment when you realized you wanted to move into leadership roles like showrunner or executive producer?
Yeah, I think so. And that goes back to me being at Disney. And I think it pretty much had to do with, I always had a pretty clear perspective on the material of whatever I worked on. And I wanted to work on something that I actually wanted to watch. And I don't mean that in a harsh term, because I love the movies I worked on at Disney, and I think they're amazing, and I'm very proud to have been a part of them. But if I wasn't in animation, like I said, I don't seek out Broadway style musicals to go watch, and as much as one of my favorite classic Disney films is Sleepy Hollow, I hate it for one thing, and that just as I start to think the Headless Horseman is gonna maybe get Ichabod and they're really in jeopardy, they throw in some wacky gag where the horse goes around the tree or his nose gets caught on a branch and he goes rah, 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 right? And I know that's comforting to real little kids, but I was like, no, I was almost there. You almost had me at that life and death moment. So I think, I wanted to hopefully direct and supervise, the type of things that I actually wanted to watch, or that would thrill me as who I was as a little kid.
Right. Yeah. Scooby-Doo has decades of history. So how did you approach adding your own creative voice while respecting what fans love about the series?
Yeah, that's a really interesting tightrope, right? Because previously I think it was Be Cool Scooby-Doo is the version that preceded mine, which was very funny, but it didn't really click. And I think there's a feeling that, well, gosh, you can't keep doing the same card trick for everybody and expect them to show up. So what if we do something completely different? And then diehard fans, they're like, no, that's not Scooby. So I think with our version, the version I pitched was, well, let's do like classic Scooby-Doo movies, but with modern guest stars. And it'll just play modern because we're modern. We will time it out. It'll have modern timing and modern sensibility because we're not relics, at least not yet. And that's kind of how it went. Now, originally, I did want to make one little tweak, and we made a joke about it in the Tim Gunn episode, where he talks about maybe giving Daphne a facelift, or not facelift, what do you call it? A new look. And a facelift, that's awful. And he made the suggestion of giving her little brown boots. And he goes, nope, never mind, never mind. You're perfect just the way you are. Well, I did in my original designs give her little brown boots, and I think I gave her leggings. I'm not sure. In one version she had leggings, but the rest was the same. Um, Velma, I wanted to update a little bit because I wanted it to be now. I don't want to make a put shiny big light on it, but if they needed a cell phone, they would have a cell phone, but it wouldn't be, look, we have electronics now, um, so I actually gave her white Converse and gray leggings and kept everything else the same. I thought she looked fantastic. Scooby, or Shaggy, I had a version, I gave him Vans and skateboard pants, just black pants. That looked great. Kept the long shirt. And Fred, I couldn't change and have it just not look like a different character. So Fred's Fred. But ultimately they said no, even those little changes. It was a Warner Brothers call. They didn't want to do that. They were like, no, straight. I think they're reacting maybe still from Be Cool Scooby-Doo. They were, nope, straight classic designs. So that's how that came about. In terms of tone, I don't know. Mike Ryan and I, Mike's an even bigger fan of Scooby than me. I just trusted him,
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I just I'll just ramble on. When you throw me a question, I'll
No,
just,
you're fine.
hopefully within all that, there's the answer you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think the changes would have gone over with fans if you were able to do those?
Do you know, I bet it would have been all right because I think there was an episode of Mystery Inc. Well, I know there was an episode of Mystery Inc. There was a subplot, which I found the subplot was a little bit of a stretch, that Velma and Shaggy kind of had a thing going on. And Velma was trying to change Shaggy's look, and she had him dress in skateboard pants, tight skinny jeans. And I saw that. It was after I did my pitch. I was like, I think he looks great. I don't know what they're talking about. And there was no huge uproar. Of course, that was just one episode and a gag. But we did the episode where they went up the river, the sneaker episode. And, I think he had a beard. I grew a little beard and put a rubber band in it. And I think Velma cut off her sweater, just to be a little cooler. So we kind of had some fun with her looks. But I don't know. You know what? I think you can't really worry about that kind of thing. I think, if you like the source material, I think you're not going to do anything that's disrespectful. And if you accidentally do, I think there'll be someone around you to tell you that, hey, maybe there's another way to do that.
Did you see Velma, the series?
I did. I watched a couple. Yeah. And it wasn't for me,
Yeah. I think I only got through 2 episodes, and I felt like they changed the characters too much. It wasn't.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's exactly right. There's something, I didn't feel like it came from a place where they loved the characters. It's like, what can we do with this? How can we shock people with a new Velma series? It wasn't like, hey, let's do a Velma series where she's off camera from the Scooby-Doo show and show this other aspect of her life, and maybe we can be a little more, loose with the material than we would for an 8-year-old. But it reminded me as a kid, because again, I liked comic books, and back in the 70s, there was a Spider-Man series and an Incredible Hulk live action series, and you just, knew that they got it and they go, well, what are we going to do with this? So they change people's names and they change the concepts, and you look at it and you go like, what the hell? That's not who that character is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. They wanted to shock people, and they did.
Oh, they
got
did,
a little
yeah.
mileage out of it, But
Yeah.
it wasn't for me.
So how do you direct humor in Scooby-Doo so it lands for both kids and adults?
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, kids are a little more, it's funny, kids are tough and kids are forgiving. Kids like physical humor because when you're a kid, you don't have a whole lot of, life experience behind you, so you get humor, and humor is based on what you understand. And every kid understand what it's like to push somebody over, or have a boo scare, somebody jump out at you. So I think those things are kind of fun. But I think you have to have, some smart dialogue and a smart twist, to engage someone older, and you want, somebody watching with an older brother or sister, to be entertained by it. And so yeah, I guess the writing, it's funny, I've never really articulated outside, but I think the writing just has to be smart, and you have to approach the material in a smart way. But then, make sure you're throwing in a lot of fun slapstick, and you keep the pace going so you're not going to bore the kids.
Yeah. What's the biggest creative challenge of working within such a well-defined franchise?
Yeah, it's funny because it wasn't really, I didn't really find it confining. It was actually really fun. I mean, Frank Welker, he's done Fred since he was like 20 or something. And I've worked with Frank a couple times in the past, on different projects. But being able to work with him as Fred and Scooby now, and like think back, like when I was like eating cereal and watching him on TV, he was down here doing that, and this is the guy, that's super fun. But again, I think because the world is, uh they pretty much live where we live, that there really isn't a limitation. um I never felt like someone was telling me you can't do that. um I wasn't trying to, like when I made Runaway Brain years ago, Mickey had gone stagnant, and I really wanted to kind of blow up Mickey Mouse, and get everyone to say, "Oh, what's that? Wait, that's Mickey?" Some people, would say it's the coolest Mickey cartoon ever, and other people, how dare you do that with Mickey Mouse? So I wasn't really in that position. I wanted it to feel modern. I didn't want it to feel like I was living in the past, or any of us making it were living in the past, but I did just want to honor it. What was hard about it was every episode is a new location. Kim Possible, by contrast, half the show was Homeschool and Bueno Nacho. It was a 3-camera sitcom for half the episode. And then half the episode, they went to the Amazon or up in space or wherever they needed to go. So, we only had to design half an episode of new locations. But Scooby was just, brand new all the time. So I think that was just a phenomenal amount of work. But no limitations.
Yeah. How did the process of bringing in guest stars work, and how closely were you involved in choosing and working with the celebrities who appeared on the show?
Yeah, well, I recorded all the dialogue as well. So I worked with the actors, the Scooby Gang, and the guest stars. Mike Ryan stepped in a couple of times when I had a conflict. But yeah, it's a tough thing because here we're trying to develop stories, get them approved by the studio, but we don't know if that guest star is going to be in the episode or not. So, the Terry Bradshaw episode was like one of my favorites. And I was like, and I remember Jay Bastian, we were like thinking, it's like, man, can we just make him a regular part of the gang, or just like bring him in every 3 or 4 episodes? He had so much energy. And, but so what we did was we wrote a sports episode that, with a little bit of tweaking, you could make it it could be a baseball player or a basketball player, and we were so we had the story outline. Mike had the story outline created, and then when he agreed to do it, then he's like, "Great, I can go forward with football now." But the alien was there, the plot was all there, so that it got a little dicey with Cher, because we really, Mike and I, we wanted her to do it because she was in the original show, and she was interested, but we couldn't tie it down. And he kept having to, fine tune the episode, and it finally looked like it wasn't going to happen. And I remember the producer telling me that, we're just going to have to, like pull the offer because it's too late. And we were all really disappointed. Then I think like literally like a day later, we were committed and we had a recording date. So we were all pretty excited about that. So that was tough because, we need to get stories approved with an idea of who we wanted to go out to. And then if that person couldn't do it, then we had to have a story that was flexible enough that we could go out to somebody else and not unravel the whole episode. So if you look at the episodes in terms of, oh, a comedian guest star, oh, a sports guest star, you can kind of see how if we didn't get our star, how we could maybe fit somebody else into it.
Yeah. Was there a particular guest star whose casting came about in an unexpected way?
I don't think unexpected came about. I think it was more just that, like, we can't believe we got him. Like Morgan Freeman. It's like, holy crap, he said yes. That's amazing. And but usually it was a little bit of brinkmanship where we weren't sure that the guest was going to come on board in time. Now, originally, I'm going to go back a little bit because when I pitched a couple different concepts. I pitched one episode that was, or one take that was that they were on vacation, and I just figured, that it was like summer vacation, and they were going down Route 66, and like any family vacation, Dad gets his day, Mom gets her day, the kids get to pick their thing, to go to lunch. And I just figured that would be a place where we could showcase what the different people were into. If we did Shaggy and Scooby, when it was up to them, they would pick a new, diners, dive and drive-in type place. And Velma might pick a vintage clothing store, something like that. And then that's where a mystery would take place. So that didn't go forward, unfortunately. But wait, oh God, I lost track of your question again. There was going to be a point. I'm just going to circle around it.
Was there a particular guest star whose casting came about in an unexpected way?
Oh, that's right. So no. Nothing was unexpected, except originally in the version that when we finally got the Scooby-Doo movies, is I wanted half the guest stars to be animated. That's why you have Wonder Woman in the Flash episode and things like that. And there's a history for Batman being in Scooby-Doo. But as the more of the series progressed, it went from 50-50. Like my first pitch was all classic Hanna-Barbera library stars, and we'll figure out a way to make it work. And then they were like, well, let's do 50-50. And then slowly they wanted more and more guest stars to where, it's more like, 80-20 or something like that. So I think that's while not unexpected, it was the evolution of the show.
Did the guest stars have any flexibility with their dialogue?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. With, especially when you get someone like Ricky Gervais, the dialogue, I mean, he'll record it just as you wrote it, but then he may ask, or we may offer, it's like, well, what else could we do with this line? Does anything else come to mind? Or, and yeah, he riffed quite a bit. And I think a lot of them, we're always open to it, because I would tell them that this is you, Malcolm McDowell. It's like, this is you, the gang is very big and over the top. So, you should probably be the cocktail party you, just be on a little bit and big. But if something doesn't sound like you, yeah, let's change it.
Were there any guest appearances that almost happened but fell through at the last minute?
Gosh, I'm sure, but I can't recall. That's just part of it, People are up and down, and then someone you shot was a sure thing. They have a conflict and can't do it. The one big surprise was where the gang got to play themselves. Mike and I really wanted to do that. And Matt wanted to appear on the show as a celebrity. He was a celebrity
That
guest
would have been
star,
cool.
as well as
Yeah.
being Shaggy. And we pitched that a couple of times, and Warner Brothers didn't want to do it. And he had a TV series at the time, and it would have been perfect. And there was something that came about where we had an opening, and that's where we pitched the idea that the gang is in the show as guest stars. And I can't remember the event that actually happened that opened that door, but they went for it. So that was kind of our little homage to that original idea that Matt had, where he wanted to be a guest star as Matt.
That was a great idea. I think that's actually my favorite episode. Is
Oh,
with
is it? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Tell me why.
Because I feel like they don't really get their moment in the spotlight. People know who they are, they know their names, but not everyone knows their faces. And I just thought it was really cool to bring attention to them, especially Frank Welker, because, like you said, he's been voicing Fred since 1969.
When we were cutting the episode together, it really, like, he became the focus, especially at the end, of that scene in the recording booth. Yeah, that was wonderful. There was something else you said in there that sparked a memory about this episode. But yeah, that's great.
I actually just met him a few weeks ago at a Comic-Con. He was very, very nice, and I was very excited to meet him.
Yeah, he's a powerhouse. There were sometimes, because he was doing his TV series at the same time, and he couldn't record with the gang, and we'd have to do him separately, and he didn't have a lot of time. But man, he can just plow through the script.
Yeah.
And he'll sometimes hit a line and he'll just go back and do it a couple of times to give you a different flavor. But we would just do whole chunks at a time, and then he'd ask me if there's anything I wanted to go back and hit. But it was, nobody knows that character better than him, and he loves doing it, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there any guest star in particular that you were excited to have on the show?
Well, Cher, because I watched her when I was a little boy, and I watched her on her variety show, so that was fun because I was a little bit starstruck by her resume, and I've been watching her my whole life. But she was in just like as nice and cooperative and like just genuinely fun and easy to be with. So that was great for that reason. And then, similar thing, Terry Bradshaw. No, gosh, I'll have to name everybody. No, I was excited by pretty much everybody. Some people I was a little less familiar with. So that was kind of fun getting to know them a little bit more. But yeah.
Is there anyone you wish that you were able to get on the show?
We really wanted Dolly Parton on the show.
Oh, that would have been great.
Because we wanted to put to do a mystery in her theme park, and and we thought it was going to happen for a while, and when it finally the answer came down no, we were disappointed.
I've always said I would have loved to have seen Betty White.
Yeah, I know, and we went out to her for sure, and I think she was just kind of getting up there, and I think it was just maybe just a little too much. The Alec Trebek episode I really enjoyed, and we didn't realize how he was quite sick at the time.
Yeah.
But man, when you say action, he's like there. He knows that show, and he's done it so much. He was just rattling off the rhythm, and he knew all the characters' names and who was standing where, and so yeah, that was a pretty amazing thing too.
That's my second favorite episode. I thought
how far down is
really...
Christian Slater?
I'm not sure.
Well, the reason I bring it up is that that was like Mike and I, that's like one of our, top episodes.
Yeah.
And it came about, we were having lunch in between records, and I said, "What do you think? Do you think we could do like an opera where just that everyone just sings through the whole episode and just do some kind of horror opera thing?" And I had some Buffy episodes stuck in my head or something, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And he's like, "Yeah, that'd be great." So we came up with the idea there, and of course it got scaled back to being a more traditional musical. But that was one of our favorites, and that was directed by Mike Milo. And we thought, turned out really well.
Yeah. It's a fun series. Did you guys rewatch the original series, the new Scooby-Doo movies, to get some ideas for this, or?
Not so much Scooby-Doo movies, but I did rewatch the original, at least the first series. I had them all sent to me because I wanted to remember exactly like what it was I liked about it as a kid, and those memories would flash back. And that something we wanted to do, and we achieved it sometimes a little more and sometimes a little less, but I wanted to reuse cycles of animation in a similar way. I like that, when the characters all ran, they ran in their stock runs. And so I looked at all the different, takes that Scooby would do and Shaggy would do and the gang and their, and Scooby, the different ways that he would skid and turn around. Usually they would do the hard animation off camera, like, he'd run off camera, maybe slide, then you just kind of come back in going the other way. But they actually did have a couple of pieces of animation where he did actually turn in space. And I love that because all those animators at that time, while they were working in TV and they had the budget constraints, they all grew up through classic animation. And when the characters had to move, they moved pretty well. Those are some pretty great runs on the characters.
Yeah.
So I looked at them just to do that and kind of get a feeling for how they did the traditional left-right staging, and when they really pulled off depth with foreground, middle ground, and background, but kept the animation moving left to right, so it was relatively easy to animate. So I had frame blow-ups of that I passed out to the directors, and said, let's get some of this into the show. So that was more the influence of the original, not so much on, how they timed gags or anything like that.
Right. Which member of Mystery Inc. do you relate to most?
I don't know. I want to say I would aspire to be Velma because she's like Spock, and Mike and I would refer to her that way. And I think I'm probably Scooby. I'm a little smarter than Shaggy, but still, not so smart.
We're going to go off Scooby for the rest of our questions.
Okay.
You're credited as working on the Paula Abdul Opposites Attract video. What was that like?
Yeah, that was fantastic. I was actually at Disney Feature Animation at the time. I was in between The Little Mermaid and Rescuers Down Under. And Mike Patterson, who was a director that I knew from Rhythm and Hues, I'd met him. I wasn't super close to him or anything. But he said, "Hey, I got this Paul Abdul video, and I wondered if you could design the characters and direct the animation." And so it's like, yeah, sure. So I had a little Lion Lamb video machine set up in my garage, and I asked all my friends at Disney to at least animate a shot, and I think 3 of us animated most of it, Will Finn and Larry White and myself. But then if you saw a credit list, which I don't think there is one, I have a copy with one, but there are a lot of animators on there that did like 1 shot, 1 or 2 shots. I was shameless about just approaching anybody. But that's how that came about. I was just asked to do it, and I actually never met Paula. I did go to the shoot one day and I watched it. And I didn't meet Paula until years later when I was at Disney Feature on Hercules. She was coming through the building. They were giving her a tour. And so Peter Schneider, who was president of Feature Animation, made sure that she went by my office. So we could talk for a minute.
Oh, that's nice. It's a really cool video with the scat cat. Very memorable video.
Yeah, thanks for that. It was fun. It got a little life on Stranger Things first season
Yeah.
I saw, and then that there was that the Chip and Dale movie a couple of years ago. He made a little appearance in that too.
Nice. Was there ever a project or something that you loved that you weren't able to bring to fruition?
Gosh, great question. I haven't really thought about that kind of thing in a long time. Um, there has to be. I mean, I've always wanted to do, I love superhero stuff, and I always want to do something that's kind of fun and cartoony and superhero-y. And I've got my own shorts I'm developing along those lines. Um, but I'm talking about a professional project. Well, I can't really talk about it. I'm under NDA, but it was a cartoony superhero-y thing that was kind of like a mashup. Um, it scratched the same itch of like literally I was going to find a way to put the Flintstones next to Scooby-Doo gang, and I thought
Oh,
we had a great idea to do it. And at first you're like, how do those things fit together? But then you come up with the right idea and you're like, oh, of course that can work. So yeah, there was an idea at Warner Brothers that I had, and there's some did a lot of artwork for it, and we even got the script on it, and it was going to be that kind of mashup. Um, yeah, but I can't really talk about it. I did develop, well, one thing I could talk about, I did some development work for a kid-friendly Spider-Man series for Marvel Disney Junior. And it was little more cartoony, but I loved it because it was going to be similar to what I wanted to do with Scooby, where, because I started looking at comic books before I could read them. I think maybe I could read, but I could read it at first grade level, so I couldn't really read the comic books, but I loved reading the pictures. So I understood what the appeal of Spider-Man and the Lizard and Doc Ock were to a 6 or 7 year old. So I did a bunch of drawings and along that regard. So I was ashamed that that never happened. And I know there's a kid-friendly CG Spider-Man out there, but it's not Peter Parker and it's not those villains. It's this kind of other thing. But I think that's probably it. So I'm doing major damage to scratch that itch.
nice. I saw a short that you just posted a couple weeks ago. It was about I'm not sure what kind of animals they were, but one was on rollerblades and one was skateboarding. I'm not sure if
Oh,
you actually created it or someone else did.
let's see, rollerblades and skateboarding.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. No, this is gotcha. No, this is Exceptional Minds, Dylan's short.
Okay.
So I work at a company part-time called Exceptional Minds. It's for animators and effects artists that are on the spectrum. And one of the animators there pitched this idea for a short called Watch Your Tone. And it's very personal to him. It's about a particular issue that he has. But yeah, he created these two characters that they kind of look like, the girl kind of looks like to me if like The Simpsons and Woody Woodpecker had a baby or something. And
Yeah.
and there's a guy, and his particular issue is that when he gets frustrated, it just kind of comes out as an outburst, and sometimes because of his tone, people think he's being judgmental when he's not. And so yeah, so these two kids have a skateboard date and at a skate park, and they meet up, and the first thing out of his mouth wasn't hi, he was like, looks at her, was like, "You're wearing skates?" And she's like, yeah. So yeah, so that was Dylan's short. And I just helped produce that. It was all his idea, and I just kind of helped him through the production of that. But yeah, it's a very, very appealing short. It's on YouTube, actually. You can do a search for that.
It was a really great message too. It's hard to understand, especially, for kids to understand that sort of thing. But I feel like that short really put it into perspective and, it gives you a better idea of how to understand stuff like that.
I know. You know, I wish I had like seen that 20 years ago.
Hmm.
You know, because working in the arts and film and animation, it's like there are a lot of people I've worked with that are on the spectrum, and I'm like, oh, that's what was going on there, and I think I wish I just had a little more awareness, but
Yeah,
never too late, I guess.
yeah. So you were talking about Major Damage. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Again, I created it originally way back, just when I left Disney Feature Animation, and I was watching X-Files, and I loved superheroes and cartoony superheroes, and came up with this idea that kind of smashed, you know, X-Files in with, you know, um, Big and, Super Duper Man, and where this kid trick-or-treating is, Major Damage, his favorite action comic book character, is kidnapped by aliens. And they see his comic book and they're just tag and release aliens. And they see that it's like, whoa, is this him? Something horrible must have happened to him. And so they decide they scan the comic book and analyze it, and they give him the superpowers back, from the comic book, and return to Earth. So originally it's Big Meets Marvel Comics. He's like stuck in this giant superhuman body. And in doing so and giving him those powers, they actually put in a chain of events on Earth that start to morph it into the world of the comic, replete with monsters and aliens and all kinds of fantastic things for him to fight. So, so I came up with that. I did a couple of short comic book stories. I did a little CG proof of concept, pitched it as a movie. Almost got it made once. Had a deal in hand with the company that did the Astro Boy movie, and I was just about to sign, and they went out of business, and so I'm glad I didn't, because I managed to keep all the rights and everything, and they weren't tangled up. But that was the concept. But it was so much work to do that little short and pitching it as a movie that I went on the shelf for a while. And I had a couple boards for these shorts, and I wanted to make them on my own, just me as a one-man show. But whenever I'd open Harmony, I would just play around with it a little bit and go, "This is too hard," and I just close it again. And then one day I got a call from someone to animate something in Harmony. And I said, well, send me a shot. Let me see if I can reverse engineer it. And, this was a paying gig, so I had a little more incentive. And I figured it out pretty quickly. And the gig never happened. But afterward, it was like, hey, wait a minute. I can do this completely on my own now, not dependent on anybody. And so now I've aged them up a little bit. It's a little less kid friendly. I've sort of based General Strike, the you know the like there's two military X-Files type person, a guy and a woman, and I sort of based him on my dad, the way he talks, and the way he kind of talks at you sometimes, not really with you,
Yeah.
and some of the military jargon, and then the woman officer made her Japanese, a Japanese exchange officer, which was sort of my really stretched thin homage to Dr. Strangelove, because the British exchange officer, who's the brains of the whole thing. And then Melvin, who's the kid. I've aged him up a little bit and given him a little more attitude. So instead of being the cute little kid who turns into the superhero now and wants to live up to his comic book ideals, he's got a little of that. I'm not helping you, And when General Strike gives him an order, he's like, no. And he's not used to being back talked like that. So that's kind of their family dynamic. And it's a way just to do superheroes and have them fight giant monsters, really.
Yeah. And people love superheroes, so.
I know, right? Well, what's not to love? It's a friend of mine. He calls them frosting colored super jocks.
It's funny. You said you based the one character off of the way your dad talks. Have you ever put yourself or someone that you know in one of your projects?
You know, I haven't directly, but you sometimes they've been written in. Mark and Bob, the creators of Kim Possible, they appeared in an episode. I don't think I was ever in an episode. I think it was there as a background character. But Warner Brothers specifically did not want us to put people in. And there was one character who did look like Sean Bishop, one of our directors. And everybody thought for sure it was Sean. I was like, no, it was never meant to be Sean. And he stayed. But no. It's not really a thing of mine that I aspire to or particularly,
Yeah.
are particularly interested in, I guess.
How have you seen the animation industry change over the course of your career?
Wow. When I got into animation, I'm going to date myself. It was the 80s, and there were no jobs. The business was dead. And I remember Rob Minkoff. He's a good friend of mine. It was in my class, and he was like, "Yeah, well, what do you expect when you go to school for a dying art form?" And I personally figured that just whatever I learned in animation school would make me a better comic book artist or whatever I ended up doing. But I never really expected it to turn around because Disney made movie every 4 years maybe, and they weren't huge hits. And TV was kind of a wasteland. I mean, I grew up, TV was pretty cool, with Johnny Quest and Scooby and all these things. And then, but by the late 70s or early 70s, through the 70s, it really became like safe little kids entertainment. The Justice League became the Super Friends, and they just had to convince the bad guys that they were doing bad things, and there was no real jeopardy, and so it was a little less interesting. So that's how it was when I got in the business, and I just happened to be lucky that I struck at that time. I went out into the workplace when Dragon's Lair came out, and all of a sudden teenagers were watching animation, and Roy Disney got more involved in Disney feature animation, and they decided to up the output of films and really let's see if we can actually make this a viable business model again. So I was there for about 10 years. Then of course there was a phenomenal boom, and now we're in a little bit of a bust again. There's not a whole lot of work at the moment, but for different reasons. Animation has never been popular. I think it's that just because of outsourcing and things like that, it's not particularly economical to do a lot of work in the country.
How do you think AI is going to change the animation industry?
Yeah, I do. I don't. I think it already is in the sense of for development art. So it used to be that a studio or a creative executive would hire someone like me, like for those Spider-Man designs. Here I got this pitch for an idea. Can you do some design so I can go into my boss and see if I can sell the series? Where now they're just using Grok or something to generate some images. If we did Kim Possible today and she looked like she was inspired by K-pop Demon Hunters, what would she look like? And then they'll go into that, because if you can use AI, if it's not part of production per the different collective agreements out there. I played with it a little myself. I've done some interesting things. It's not particularly directable. You can get it to do something, and it might be kind of neat. You know, I've used AI in Harmony Ember for background extensions. That's kind of interesting because I had a background and I did a camera jar, and when the character hits the ground, you need to bounce the background up and down. I didn't have enough background, so I would have had to crop the camera in to do it. But with this tool, I could expose half the frame with white and say, here, just paint it out to the edge of the frame, continue the painting. And it did it. And it looked great. And I could see in production, that's something that we wouldn't have been able to send backwards, on a TV budget. We would have had to scale in and done less of a move. But yeah, I think it's going to change things. I think it's going to change everything from live action, visual effects, animation.
Yeah. Looking back at your career, what project felt like a true turning point for you creatively and professionally?
I think it was the Paul Abdul video. It was the Paul Abdul video and Mighty Joe Young. I kind of credit both those films. Paul Abdul was a little more direct because I'd signed, a contract at Disney, and while I was exclusive as a feature animator, I could direct a music video. Um, and directing that on the outside helped my career move forward at Disney. Because I was able to jokingly say, "What did I sign my contract for? Did my career move faster on the outside?" And so then I got a couple of theme park projects to direct, and I directed the animation on Hocus Pocus. Um, so that was my first CG live action film.
Yeah. What has been the most meaningful fan reaction you've received for your work on Scooby or anything?
Meaningful. It's funny, for the work, you sometimes you get, very rarely, some runaway brain. I got a few hate mails, but I also got really fun, supportive mails like, "Wow, I never thought Mickey could be cool." So those were kind of gratifying. But usually the comments I'll get that are meaningful have to do with either a conversation I had with somebody that someone comes back at me with years later, or a response I gave them to some of their work. And I've been lucky enough, because it's funny that you work and and I can get tunnel vision and just sort of bark at people what I want, and like anybody else, I'm human. So, but I have also gotten a lot of really nice feedback over the years from people that that I gave extra time to, or a thoughtful comment. And one friend of mine, Shannon Tyndall, is a great writer director now. He reached out to me when I was in Hercules, and he was going to high school, and he just said, "Hey, can I show you some of my work?" And it's like, "Yeah, absolutely." Love connecting with fans. I was a fan. I loved connecting with people when I was, a teenager. And so I like to pay that forward. And I remember him being so excited when he got accepted to Cal Arts, and now he's directed movies, and.
Yeah. What is a small creative decision you made on a project that ended up having a big impact?
Small creative decision. The only it's funny that the thing that jumped out at me when you first said that was when I worked on the live action Garfield movie. It ultimately wasn't my decision, so this may not really be answering your question, but there was this phenomenal debate whether Garfield should talk or not, or whether the CG Garfield should just stand there and look at you, and you should just have voiceover. And I was just pretty steadfast from the beginning, and I couldn't even believe we just kept having the conversation over and over again, because I'm thinking, if you don't make him talk and you just do voiceover, you might as well just put a real cat in there, you know? And we've seen that in Homeward Bound type movies, and I don't think they did exactly that in Homeward Bound, but if you're gonna do voiceover and you're gonna do an animated cat, you should make him talk, because it's more entertaining to watch him talk than not. So I think I was, and well, in retrospect, you could say, not my movie. Why did I even care? It's not. It's Jim Davis, and it's Fox, and it's the director, and all these other people. But yeah, I think I was pretty steadfast on that. If anybody would remotely listen to me, I'd give them that opinion, and ultimately, I think proved to be the right one.
I think I'd have to agree that if Garfield's not going to talk, then just get an orange cat.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Hocus Pocus, there was a small decision there as well that uh, how my involvement came about on that movie was I'd come back to feature animation and I had a little CG experience, and the Hocus Pocus people into Disney, and they weren't sure how to animate their cat. They had a test where they painted the cat's mouth talking. They had one where they did a 2D morphing of its face, and they had like a 3D, set of dentures in its mouth to talk. Then they had one where they had a full CG head. And the tests, they all had issues, and they didn't know what to do. And Peter Schneider, said, "Oh, talk to Chris Bailey." So they showed them to me, and I said, "Well, the 2D painted mouth test, no matter how good you do it, it's just going to look like what they would do in the 1940s. A really good version of that, but it's going to look dated." I said, "The 2D version where you're warping the cat's mouth is good. That can definitely work. I don't think this test is working for you, but your problem is you can't really turn its head if you need it to go, wait, I said, I think the 3D head's the way to go." So they ultimately put me working with each of those different effects houses for 2 weeks on a shot, so that I could help make each one of them under my guidance, as good as I could make them, or what I think the studio director was looking for. And then I did a presentation, and it was the 3D head from Rhythm and Hues that won the day.
Yeah. Of all the things you've worked on, what are you most proud of?
Maybe, I think, gosh, Kim Possible, maybe. I think maybe Kim Possible, because I've probably, like, even though it was completely Mark and Bob's idea, they brought me on, to bring it to life, and they were very magnanimous and gave me an equal executive producer credit, and I was supervising director. And I brought Steve Silver in, and Alan Bodner, and all that. So I feel like there's a lot of me in that show. Kim's sweatshirt is based off Johnny Quest. Mark and Bob and I are big fans of Johnny Quest, and we love action comedy. So maybe that one, I think that one certainly is what jumps forward. And then Runaway Brain, because I'm so, tied to it. It's infamous, and people love it and people hate it, and Disney, for some reason, pretends it doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
So I've really kind of come to embrace that now. How it came about was I was developing Mickey shorts at Disney, and I did this drawing, and I just put it on my wall, and Tim Hauser, who is my friend who is developing the shorts, said, "What's this one about?" And I go, "I don't know. I'm just kind of channeling Calvin and Hobbes, pretending to be Godzilla, and you can tell that from the drawing, the way he's holding his legs and everything." And he's like, "Well, that's funny." And so he came up with the brain switch episode. But so anyway, what's funny is that, so it came out, and people loved it, people hated it, and it got some really nice play. And then they decided, you know what, this isn't the vision we want for Mickey Mouse, so they just kind of buried it. But now, in all the years since then, because we had a screening at CTN year before last, and put it on the big screen, and I showed some merchandise and some early versions of endings and things like that. And when you look at it in today's eye, it's not that extreme anymore. They've done things much more aggressive, and in the horror realm and everything with Mickey than we did there. I was just first. So now, since they don't want to show it, I'm embracing it with open arms now, maybe a little more than before.
There you go. What advice would you give someone that is looking to get into the animation industry?
Now's a really difficult time. I think I'm kind of out of advice. I mean, clearly you need to understand filmmaking and acting and drawing, and even with AI, if the future is, people, and they're literally just artfully making prompts like a director talks to a crew, you have to be skilled in those areas to understand how to shape it. I mean, I hope the business doesn't come to that. But in terms of work, I think the industry, it's going to take a few years for things to kind of shake out. But I would say if you want to make animation, make animation. The tools have never been easier for you to be a one-man show. So this is because I teach at Chapman University, and for everything that looks like it's negative, there is a positive. It used to be, to make a movie, you had to have a studio because they had hundreds of millions of dollars and you didn't, right? And so now studios, a lot of play gets made where, someone like Jeffrey Katzenberg or a studio executive will say, I can now make an animated movie for 10% of the price that I used to be able to, or 10% of the crew. And, it's very inflammatory, and people are like, oh my God, where are we going to work? Well, the flip side of that is also true, that 10 people in a room can make a movie that looks like it costs $100 million to make, and you don't need the studio to bankroll your film and to distribute your film. I think the thing that the next generation will have to solve, and studios are having to solve this, is, well, what's the monetization model? But just like anybody could, with a typewriter, could make a book, like anybody with an idea can make a live action or an animated film, I think, in the near future. Ugh. I don't like it, but I think it's the way it's going.
It is kind of the nice thing about the internet, though, that the people that work in the industry now, or people that want to be in the industry, they do have platforms like YouTube and social media that they can get their own stuff out there to the public without having to go through a studio to do that.
That's right. And even when the studios do hire, they actually look at the internet, and they're looking for creators that are putting things out there and have a particular point of view. So I remember, like, someone asked Quentin Tarantino one time, well, how do I break into the film industry? And he goes, make a movie. Make a movie that when somebody watches it, they feel like somebody just threw a stick of dynamite in their lap. Get somebody's attention. So yeah, I think the tools and the internet have never made that easier. And if I can learn, harmony and be a one-man show, anybody can learn it.
If you didn't go into animation, what would you have done?
I probably would have pursued comic books. That's definitely, I don't know, you can really see there's original comic book art on the wall, and there's some comic book boxes behind me, some Fantastic Four and a Spider-Man cover. Probably that. And if, of course, that business isn't doing so well either now. I thought about there was going to be a strike when I was at Disney, and I was just starting my career, and I was thinking, maybe I'll be a cop. And my son's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you didn't become a cop. You would have been a horrible cop. I'm like, what's that supposed to mean?
Oh, that's funny. My final question.
Mm-hmm.
Every year on your birthday, I post happy birthday with a picture of you with a monkey on your shoulder.
Oh.
And I'm just curious, can you tell me about that picture?
Oh my gosh, that's so, I completely forgotten about that. Thank you for reminding me. That was actually on the set of Hop. And the monkey was one of the acts that David Hasselhoff was judging in the competition. And that's actually the same monkey from Night at the Museum. And I just saw the trainer had the monkey. And usually, even though, like, if I see celebrities or I see people working, like the guy with the monkey, I do want to go over and just be like a 10-year-old kid and say, can I play with the monkey, or can I have your autograph, or can I say, hi, I loved you in this movie? And I just don't. I don't have it in me to do that. Um, and it's, but then someone else, I told them that you know, God, there's the monkey. I love watching the monkey. And he goes, well, go tell him. And say he'll he'll love to show you the monkey. He loves doing it. I'm like, really? So I actually did summon up the courage and say, hey, can I say hi to the monkey? And he's like, sure. And he like had it, climb up me and jump on my head and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So that's what that's from. I was very happy. You can kind of tell in the picture.
It was a great picture. It almost looked like you knew him very well. So
yeah. I don't know. It was a very sociable monkey. That's all I can say. He was very easy to make friends with.
once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. So it's pretty cool that you got to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there anything is there anybody about the crew or anything in particular? Like because I tend to ramble. I
No, it's
recognize
fine.
that.
Anything you want to
Is
say is great.
but is there any like what were your favorite? You told me what your favorite episode was. What about some of the others that come to mind?
From Guess Who?
Yeah, guess who?
The Malcolm McDowell one I really liked. I just thought it was really fun. That was the one because they were going through time.
Yeah, he was wonderful to work
And
with
time
too.
travel is a fun thing, and it was really kind of cool just, to have the gang doing a time travel thing.
That the Scooborg and Shagborg
Yeah.
bit, I love that scene.
Yeah.
That was just one of the best directed scenes, by Sean. And I remember being in the mix and like, wow, this is great. Matt Lillard, a little bit of trivia. He was a little like when he read the script, he was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is Shaggy because it seemed a little too sci-fi and violent. And I remember just doing my best to reassure him that it's not going to come out that way. I guarantee it. If it does, those scenes won't be in the movie, but it's going to be funny and silly. And I just love how that one turned out. I actually use a scene from that at Chapman when I let people, build the scene with sound effects and everything. I just give them the storyboards and all the sound effects and dialogue and go, here, you assemble it.
That's really cool. There were a lot of guest stars that I didn't know. So I wasn't, I would say maybe a third of them I probably didn't know who they were.
Yeah, there were a few that I actually weren't familiar with, like Liza Kochi. She was an internet personality, and the requisite wasn't so much that people had to know them; it was whether we thought they would be a fun character to fit with the gang. Because as a kid, I didn't know half the people that were actually live action celebrities that my parents would have known from a variety show or something. But
it was cool that Cher and Sandy Duncan were in the original, the new Scooby-Doo movies, and then they were in the new version too. That was really cool. And I love Sandy Duncan, so having her in it was great. That's another one of my favorites.
Yeah, she was fantastic. And, another person I just, grew up watching, not just from Scooby, but, in live action. And, she couldn't have been, a bigger joy to work with. There was one lament, and I love this episode, but there's one key thing that I just that really sticks in me. It was the Jeff Foxworthy episode. Like, I love that episode, and I think Frank Parr directed it, and I remember Nadia's backgrounds are just beautiful in that episode. When we went to do the record at the very last minute, Warner Brothers said that we can't use the term redneck. That's Jeff Foxworthy's whole thing, is he took the sting out of the term redneck and made it fun and funny, and so they gave us some alternates we could use, like Country Boy and something else, which I think we ended up using. And I just remember being so embarrassed. I had to say, here's the problem. We can't use Country Boy. We can't use Redneck. And that was a running joke through the whole thing. You couldn't just take them out because it was the punchline. And they say we can do this or that. He's like, Country Boy? And he goes, I find that kind of insulting. And I go, yeah. I said, look, if you don't want to do it, I know it's not fair that we just sprung this on you. I understand. And Jay, our executive, said, well, look, I'll fight it some more, but you'd have to record both. And so we did record both, and we didn't get to air it. But I just hate that because he was such a great guy to work with, and I and I think he did a fantastic job, and I loved the way the episode turned out with the monsters and the art direction and it's classic Scooby. But I'm like, oh, we didn't let the actor do what he does.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen him live. He's pretty funny with the whole redneck thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had his show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And all that stuff.
Yeah. I had a question and it has gone out of my brain.
Oh, another episode? Well, here, I'll tell one more anecdote. You can, hopefully it'll come back. So when I was nervous, probably most nervous about working with Cher. I can't say why. I don't know why. I just was. And maybe because it was on again, off again, on again, off again. And in the recording studio in Santa Monica, it was a little bit of an awkward setup because looking ahead of me was like where the engineer was. And then the booth for the actor was over here. And usually I'm sitting next to the engineer or behind them looking out at the actor. So it's all, I don't have to do, any head turns to look at them. And it felt a little awkward for me. And so I asked her if she'd like me to read the lines, with her. I said, because if I'm out here, I can read the lines and push the button, but I'm going to be turning my head back and forth a lot. Or I could go in the booth and I could just read them with you. She goes, do that. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I remember at one point in the record, she just kind of stretched back and she's like, how fun is this? And I said, fun for you. I'm reading Scooby-Doo with Cher. And she laughed.
That's really cool. That's a great experience to have. To be able
Yeah,
to
because
read
while
with
doing
Cher.
it, I would do the voices. Sometimes I do the voices. I would ask the actors first if they wanted me to do my version of the voices. And but yeah, while I'm doing it, I'm thinking again, I was like, 6 years old watching, her, when and Sunny in the original version. Then I grew up in grade school watching her on TV, and so it's fun to interact with someone on a professional level that you've had a one-sided relationship with growing up.
Yeah. So can you do your Scooby impression?
Oh gosh, I haven't done it in so long. But when we recorded Axl Rose, I forgot to ask him. I asked him if he wanted me to read, but and so he was reading, and he said yeah. And then it got to the line, and I can't remember what it even was. God, I'll need a line. I think I'm gonna mess it up. With Shaggy, I would go like super high, and I can't do the voice, but I could do the cadence really well. So when Matt would come in, it would actually, if I had to ADR a line. No, I'm sorry. This is what happens sometimes. Sometimes we need to change a line, and we don't have the actors back until the episode's done. So I or someone will do a scratch line and we'll cut it in, and it has to be animated to that timing. So it's really important for that timing to match. And when it doesn't, the actors are really struggling to be in character and make the sync work. But Um, but anyway, but I could do their timing pretty well. But no, I'm kind of embarrassed to do it actually. Um, because I don't even know how I'd begin. Usually if I got a script in front of me, I just kind of start doing it and it's like, it's kind of okay. But when I did it for Axl Rose, it was another good episode. Um, he burst out laughing and he laughed for probably like 45 seconds straight. He goes, man, I did not expect that.
Oh, that's great. Is there a reason that he didn't sing in his episode?
You know, there may have been a reason. I think, you know, Scooby isn't really a musical show, and Mike Milo really wanted Axl Rose to be a guest, and he had done a Teen Titans episode, so we thought there was a possibility he might say yes. And I don't think it was an edict on his part that no, I'm not going to sing or anything like that. But that doesn't mean it wasn't there. And what was fun about that is that he likes to work at night. So he wanted to record at 9 o'clock at night. And so Mike Ryan and I went to the recording studio and you know, we had dinner and we're hanging out and it's like, man, I'm like ready to like watch TV and go to bed. And it's like we have to start. And but yeah, that was a pretty nice experience. He was great.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you get to be in the studio with most of them, or was it kind of a mix of in the studio and some just sent their recordings?
You know, most of them in person. The gang, of course, was almost always in person, with the exception of Matt, who was doing his TV series and he was away a lot. Um, but Morgan Freeman was remote. He's in Kansas, I think. I forget where he lives. And Malcolm McDowell. And I really wanted to. I was watching. Uh, what was his series called? Um, it was where he was like the composer in Manhattan. I was watching that series at the time. Gosh, it's killing me. I can't remember. But anyway, and uh, but he was remote. He lives in Ojai, and which is it's not far away from LA, but he does a lot of voiceover and has his own studio there. So that was remote. And so Morgan Freeman and he were the two that I really would have liked to meet in person. But but Terry Bradshaw came in, so that was great.
Yeah, that must have been fun to have them in the studio.
Yeah, yeah. Terry Bradshaw, he worked so hard. He's got so much energy. And I remember he came out, he was like sweating all over. And I was like, it's like, was it hot in there? He goes, a little bit. And I'm like, well, you should have told us. We could have turned the air conditioning on. He goes, it's fine.
Oh, that's funny. When you worked at Disney, did you actually work in the studio?
Yeah, I was there for about 10 years.
Yeah.
I went to work on a special projects unit that was doing Sport Goofy cartoons. And they closed that unit and they asked us if we'd come help finish Great Mouse Detective. So Great Mouse Detective was the first movie I animated on. I did some shots of Ratigan at the end, real short shots of him screaming and things like that before he crashes into the clock and a few other things. Then I left to do CGI again, and they were starting Oliver and Company, but Oliver and Company got delayed, so I came back a year later and was on Oliver and Company, and I stayed for about the next 10 years. But yeah, that was all in-house.
Yeah. When you were there, and we've talked to people from Warner Brothers and from Disney, did you draw pictures of each other, like the animators and
Yeah, a few. You know,
yeah.
I wasn't as good as some others, but yeah, I got a few of like Kelly Asbury and Rob Minkoff and my closer friends, Tim Hauser. Tim was
We've seen some of the pictures that people have drawn of each other, and it's hilarious what you guys do to each other.
Yeah, there was my producer from Runaway Brain, Ron Tipp. I did some of him. I love drawing Ron and and he was such a good sport, but he didn't like them very much. And I don't, I just, it's funny. I didn't, uh, because I made him green. and just the way I'd pose him, I sort of took him, and it wasn't really so much they were him. Like when I just was like, well, here's Ron. He's a really sweet guy, and he really, and I just thought, well, what would be like this crazy alternate reality version that's sort of physically based on him? And so that's kind of what I was doing. Tim's, I remember, was being pretty cruel, but he was a good friend of mine from CalArts, so I felt like I could do that.
Funny.
Yeah, but I don't really have many of those. I have more that are done of me because I'm very pointy. I have a pointy chin and a pointy nose, and Kelly Asbury. I don't know if you're familiar with who that is, but he directed Spirit and directed one of the Shreks and Romeo and Juliet. He was in my class at CalArts. He's since passed away, unfortunately. But going back to, I probably over the years, I've lost 100 caricatures he's done of me. But he was fond of saying that he could draw me with a ruler. He would put a ruler down and just put down half a dozen straight lines, and it would somehow look like me.
All in fun, right?
Yeah, I think most of them are in fun. I think a few of them have a little twist of the knife in the gut, but
Yeah.
the hell. What's the point of being an artist if you can't use it sometimes?
Yeah.
So you have a pretty nice collection behind you. Tell me about that.
So this one is a drawing by Bob Singer. He is one of my favorite artists. I love him. We got to interview him, and he's just phenomenal. This is from Ruth Elliott Hillsden. This one I drew. This is from the new Scooby-Doo movies with Davy Jones.
Nice.
A friend drew this one. This is also Bob Singer, and another friend drew this one. So, yeah.
Excellent. So tell me about you. So what do you attribute not outgrowing Scooby like most kids do when they're at whatever age?
A lot of trauma. And
Yeah.
Scooby was like my safe space. So I think it just became my safe space like into adulthood.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, I don't think I had trauma, but there's something about like Tuesdays and Thursdays getting that stack of comics and I'm like alone in the house and it was like, oh yeah, I know all these guys. And I know the creators and the characters and yeah.
Yeah. It's like the one thing that I could sit down and watch Scooby and just kind of get lost in it and forget about what's happening in reality. And, just like you feel like you're friends with the gang, which is kind of odd, I guess, but because everyone can relate to one of the characters in some way or several of the characters in some way. So you just kind of like make almost that bond with them. And, then it's like you're with them solving the mystery and you're just kind of lost in it. And it's good. It's kind of an escape.
No, I totally understand that. And I never got when people would say, "Oh, it's just a movie," or they take their kids to something that's maybe not appropriate. And go, oh, they can tell the difference between fantasy and real life. I'm like, well, of course, but that's not the point. If a movie or TV series doesn't touch you to the point where you feel like you're involved with them and you're watching real characters in a real situation, it's failed. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's great. And I love that, especially for something that is as light and formulaic in ways that it's like the characters still resonate that well with you. That's fantastic.
There's a whole community of people like me.
No, I know, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's great. It's nice to see that, you know, through all of these years that, you know, you have have been keeping Scooby alive. I mean, you did Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, and you know that kept the franchise going. And then hopefully we'll get something better than Velma in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you what how did you perceive that? I mean, not you, I'm not asking for your critique of the show, but why they would want to blow it up like that? Or
I'm not totally sure. I have talked to some people and they have said that it's possible that the idea that Mindy Kaling had was for a show that was similar to that, and then somehow Velma's name got attached to it because Velma's a known character, so people would watch it because they know Velma. And maybe she just wanted to create her own show with her own characters, but no one would know that. So would it do as well if
mm,
Velma's name wasn't attached to it?
yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me, and it's fine, I'm a big fan of Mindy Kaling. I like, her work, and she's directed a lot of wonderful things. Um, when I heard about the show, it kind of reminds me when something falls in the public domain, like like Winnie the Pooh, or didn't they do that with the Banana Splits or something like that?
Yeah.
And someone will do some, R-rated horror thing, and I'm like, I like horror. I like a lot of R-rated movies. I'm not like prudish about that kind of stuff at all. But I'm like, well, why would you take something that is this thing and then put it's a square peg and put it in a round hole?
Mm.
I'm not so much of a fan of that. And I guess it's maybe a little weird by the fact that I, did Runaway Brain, and a lot of people maybe feel the same way about that. But I don't know. I went back to at least early Mickey's, like the Mad Doctor. I don't know if you've seen the old black and white cartoon, The Mad Doctor, but a
Mm.
mad scientist kidnapped Pluto,
Okay.
and he was holding him in his basement, and he was going to cut Pluto in half and sew a chicken, put a chicken's head on him, or do something like that to see if it would lay an egg that would hatch a flying dog. That was his plan. And Mickey had to fight his way through this haunted castle to like rescue Pluto, who at that point wasn't even his dog. He was called him his pal. He goes, "He's not my dog, he's my pal," you know. And I thought that was so great. And then when I'd watch things like Brave Little Tailor and Plain Crazy and all these things, he was like a young 18 or 20-year-old kid fighting the boss or fighting the man, and he had a lot of, aggression in him. So I was still coming at a place where I was taking the youthful Mickey that I liked in a few select shorts and some of the more extreme things he had done, and was channeling that. I wasn't trying to blow it up. So when I see these things where people, kind of blow up the concept, I'm like, really? Do you think it's all played out now and you're just kind of done with it? And so you just want to put a stick of dynamite in it? And anyway.
Yeah, I think it's different because you were a Mickey fan.
Sure.
So,
Well, I didn't really grow up watching Mickey.
yeah.
He wasn't around. I was a big Bugs Bunny fan. They didn't show Mickey cartoons on TV. So of course I knew who Mickey was, but I couldn't tell you a Mickey cartoon I saw growing up.
Hmm,
I don't think I saw. It's possible I maybe never saw a Mickey cartoon until I worked at Disney.
really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I feel with Velma, I feel like they literally just wanted to take all of the stereotypes and put them into the characters, but then make those even worse. Like you had said, you felt like they weren't Scooby fans. They weren't fans of the characters. And I think that definitely came through that they were not fans of the characters.
Yeah, it's funny if somebody does a Saturday Night Live sketch, and they've done it, where Shaggy's a stoner, and 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 Velma's gay. You know, somehow when those things seem, if they're funny, it's because they love the characters and they're pushing the stereotypes to this weird, funny parody level. I have no problem with that. I like those things, and they did it with Alvin and the Chipmunks and a lot of things that I've been attached to over the years. Um, but then when something gets presented as the real thing, like Velma, I'm like, well, why did you do that? Is it?
Yeah.
Do you think it's cool that this is the world? I don't know. It's a disconnect with me. I don't mean to bash on Velma so much. There's a lot of that out there. I don't need to add to it. Um, but yeah, I guess that's what we're saying, that I think if you love the source material, I think you can kind of do whatever you want with it, and the heart of it will still feel right,
Mhm.
and people will go with it. Because you see it in comic books, like the the uh, the Spider-Verse. I mean, a lot of people, myself included, Spider-Man's Peter Parker. So I'm like, wait, you're making a Spider-Man movie, but you're making Spider-Man somebody else now? I mean, well, why don't you just make a new character? But then I see the movie, and it's a great comic book movie, and those people who made that movie love Spider-Man, and they love comic books, and I think that was very clear. So I can still go, yeah, I still wish it was Peter Parker, but I can't. Still a great movie.
Yeah. Well, thank you for not messing with the formula of Scooby-Doo and just kind of adding in the things that you wanted to add into it and the guest stars, but keeping Scooby Scooby, and that was good. We do
Yeah, no,
appreciate
thank
that.
you. I appreciate the chance to talk about it, and we're all very proud of it. So,
Yeah, yeah. That's all the questions that I have, and thank you so much for your time because this has been great, very informative, and I love talking about Scooby. So,
all right. Well, I'm here. Anytime you want to talk about Scooby, I can go on and on. And I have gone on and on. It's like 5:30. All right. Well, thank you, Nikki. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. This has been great. Can you do a Scooby-Dooby-Doo for us in his voice?
Oh, yeah. No, of course. I'm so inhibited doing these types of things. In a recording studio, I can do it, but Ooby-Dooby-Doo! Oh, it's a little hoarse.
Excellent. That was
But
great.
okay, that's the best I can do today.
That was awesome. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. I'll talk to
All
you
right.
soon, hopefully.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A huge shout out to our patrons, Julie Rosen, Ross from ScoobyFan.net, Tagus, Garrett Spencer, Paul the Scooby Dude, and Jesse. If you would like to support the Scooby panel, please go to patreon.com/ScoobyAddicts. A very special thank you to animator, director, and producer Chris Bailey. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms or as a web series on YouTube. You can find Scooby Panel on Instagram, Facebook, and X as @ScoobyPanel. We are part of the Collector's Maze Network, where you can find all things geek. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Addicts artwork by Will Davenport. Scooby Panel logo by Garrett Spencer. Video editing by Nikki Blake. Please join us next time for another Scooby Panel.